There are 15 female world leaders currently holding office worldwide, 8 of whom are their nation's first female leaders. Why does this disparity exist? A simple answer is that the patriarchal nature of human society is responsible for this. Yes, this reductive answer is somewhat true, but it is not the whole truth. Female world leaders face a far higher scrutiny in the press than their male counterparts. We can argue against this all we want and hope that our industry is less misogynistic than that, but we know that this is not true. We see it time and time again. Jacinda Ardern was asked by a journalist if she planned on becoming pregnant during her prime ministership. Hillary Clinton was critiqued for many things, including her desire for power and the presidency, something that many male candidates have been praised for. The press has an ethical responsibility to the people of a democracy to give fair, unbiased reporting. But this is often not the case. Closer to home, this is no more clearly seen than during Julia Gillard's tenure as Prime Minister. It is hard to isolate a single incident regarding the press's sexist reporting of Gillard. She was criticised for being too feminine, for not being feminine enough, and for everything in between. Her prime ministership was defined by her misogyny speech, a powerful speech that cemented her as a feminist icon, but a speech that would not exist if it was not for some of the atrocities that Gillard was forced to face. Throughout her prime ministership, and even beforehand, Gillard was subjected to a level of scrutiny that not levelled towards her male colleagues. She faced shocking comments that simply would not have even been thought of, let alone written, about her male colleagues. A telling example of this came from Jeanette Albrechtsen, an opinion columnist for The Australian, who wrote in a 2010 article, "She has showcased a bare home and an empty kitchen as badges of honour and commitment to her career. She has never had to make room for the frustrating demands and magnificent responsibilities of caring for little babies, picking up sick children from school, and raising teenagers." Now, I don't feel the need to explain what is wrong here. Leaders should be held accountable for their political clout and their policies, not the state of their home, not the children that they have had, not anything as tangential and unrelated to politics as this. How many male politicians have had similar home lives? How many have raised children that they have left their wives when duty called? Countless. This style of reporting is clearly in breach of the MEAA's Journalist Code of Ethics. More specifically, it clearly violates the second point of the code, which states, "Do not place unnecessary emphasis on personal characteristics, including race, ethnicity, nationality, gender, sexual orientation, family relationships, religious beliefs, or physical or intellectual disability." Now, in the example from The Australian, it is clear that Albrechtsen's reporting is in violation of this code. She has placed a clear emphasis on Gillard's personal characteristics, specifically her gender and her family relationships. This style of reporting is unnecessary and would become unreadable if all politicians were reported with the same personal emphasis and vigour. And this is where the ethical dilemma of the report of Gillard lies. She was held to a different standard to those of her male counterparts, and was reported on as if she was an independent entity, rather than the Prime Minister of Australia. The Hippocratic duality of this reporting does not stand in the lens of Kantian ethical theory. Specifically, Kant's categorical imperative, which states that no one should act according to the maxim that you would wish all other rational people to follow, as if it were a universal law. This is to say that before you act on something, think to yourself, would I wish for this to be the way that people acted in this situation in perpetuity? And if it is, then proceed. If it is not, then the act is not ethical. This view can be seen as particularly poignant for the Australian media landscape, which has for years been viewed as having one of the highest levels of media ownership concentration among similar Western democracies. Specifically, as of 2016, it was reported that 57.5% of Australia's media was owned by News Corporation and associated Murdoch holdings. The Murdoch media empire, which was labelled a cancer on democracy by former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, has been described in being particularly influential in campaigning against both Rudd's and Gillard's governments. But, unlike his counterpart, Mr. Rudd was not subjected to a concerted campaign targeting his appearance and personality, nor did he have his gender constantly brought into conversation. If one is referring back to Kantian theory, this would be considered particularly unethical due to the unfair targeting of one prime minister, whilst the other was not subjected to the same levels of critique. This also helps to highlight the breaches of the MEAA's Code of Ethics, Section 2 again, with the unequal levels of critique levelled at a female prime minister as opposed to a male prime minister, specifically based upon her appearance. Ms. Gillard herself drew attention to the treatment of females by the Australian media. As previously mentioned, her misogyny speech, which drew attention to her treatment at the hands of the media and her political adversaries, was often reported on in a negative light. Ms. Gillard herself was further portrayed as someone who was seen to be an upstart trying to change the status quo, rather than as a competent and skilled leader. Whilst in Washington, D.C., promoting her memoirs in 2014, Ms. Gillard referred extensively to the smear campaign levelled against her, stating that some of the things that got published as facts were just so ridiculous that it distorted the public discussion. This highlights a clear ethical violation by certain media organizations, but, as it is now, these ethical violations were not extensively reported on. Even looking outside of the political realm, it is obvious that this trend is widespread. One only needs to look at the treatment of Taylor Harris, a current female AFL player who was targeted by online trolls over a photo of her during a game. Whilst most of the media coverage surrounding the controversy focused on her reaction to it, much emphasis was placed upon trying to downplay sexist comments directed towards her. Ben Fordham, a popular media personality, could be seen as particularly culpable in this, with his attempts to downplay the incident and the effects of misogyny not as widely criticized as they would have been if it was a male in the same position. Considering all of this, the question begs, would a male in a similar position be subjected to such heinous levels of critique as a female would? Would a media organization who have acted unethically be scrutinized more if it was a male being targeted instead of a female? For now, unfortunately, it cannot be said for sure. This is not to say that there haven't been male leaders who have been reported on in this fashion, but it can be said without a doubt that female politicians, celebrities, and athletes and etc. are all subjected to a different kind of reporting than their male counterparts, with more emphasis on their appearance and personality than actual achievements. This can all be seen as just one facet of a much larger problem: the unethical reporting of certain groups by media organizations. In recent years, these groups have differed. For example, during the 2013 election, one group that was seen to have been unfairly reported on was recent immigrants. Last year, the supposed African gang violence in parts of Victoria threw young African males into the spotlight, with this particular group being subjected to constant coverage and opinion pieces that labelled them as dangerous and as a threat to Australian culture. But one group that has been constantly reported on in a different fashion and will likely continue to do so for the foreseeable future are females in positions of authority, such as Jacinda Ardern, Hillary Clinton, and of course, Julia Gillard. If we want our society to continue to grow and evolve, the media must evolve with it. And this means that the way in which media organizations unfairly target specific groups must change too. Thank you.